What's going on, everyone? Welcome back, and today I've got the Axial SCX10-II Deadbolt version. Now this is the latest release from Axial on the SCX10-II platform at this time, and it's very similar to the Axial SCX10-II Trail Honcho that I did the 16-week budget build series on. The Deadbolt does have several differences though. It does have an AE5 rather than the AE5L that the Honcho has that has some LED light outputs. Also, the Deadbolt version has a 12-inch wheelbase rather than the 12.3-inch wheelbase. However, in the package, it does come with the plastic link set to change this over to a 12.3-inch wheelbase if you like. As far as other differences go, they're mainly cosmetic differences. The Deadbolt does have the CRC bumper that we saw on the 2017 Jeep JK, as well as the Nitto tires that came on that Jeep as well. Those Nitto tires are mounted to the Method wheels that we saw come on the new Honcho though. As far as the body goes, it's the exact same body as came on the first generation Deadbolt, except in a different color. Up front, we do have the same one-piece axle housing that we saw on the Trail Honcho, as well as dog bones rather than the universal shafts. And all of the links that come on this car are plastic, just like the Trail Honcho as well. Now, as I said, this truck is very similar to the Axial Trail Honcho in a lot of ways. Rather than do just a regular review on this car, what I'm gonna do is go through and do as many free modifications as I can to this vehicle and try and change the look and performance as much as we can right out of the box without spending really anything other than maybe the cost of some hardware or some very inexpensive minimal pieces. Hopefully this will help you get as much value out of that $299 base price of the Deadbolt 2 as you possibly can. I'm gonna go through and do a number of performance and cosmetic changes to this truck, and I think that you'll find that the overall difference between stock and what we're gonna end with is going to be pretty extreme for spending almost no money. First thing we're going to focus on is softening up the suspension and lowering the ride height. To accomplish that, we're gonna remove all the wheels and tires and the body for now. So now with the wheels and tires and body removed from the car, we're going to take the front springs off and we're going to move those to the rear, and then take those rear springs and move them to the front. So we're going to remove the lower shock screw from all four corners. With all of the shocks free, we can now remove that lower spring cup and remove the spring. The yellow springs are more firm, the white springs are less firm. What we're going to do is we're going to take these firm yellow springs from the front and put them in the rear, and then the softer white springs from the rear and move them to the front. Once you've got the white springs mounted to the front shocks, you can go ahead and replace the lower screw on just the front shocks only. In the rear, we're going to remove the shocks completely from the shock towers. Once you're to this point, now we're going to remove the two screws holding the shock tower on each side of the truck. We're going to take this cross base and we're going to slide it all the way to the forwardmost location in the chassis. And then we're going to take this shock tower, which was on the right side of the chassis, and we're going to put it on the left side of the chassis in the forwardmost location as well. The reason that we're moving these shock towers around like we are is because the Deadbolt uses this legacy body post adapter as well, just like the Honcho did. Now, due to the design of it, we can actually take it from the position that it was in, flip it to the other side, and that whole location stays in the exact same location as long as you move the cross braces just like I'm saying. So then you can take the Deadbolt body off, do this mod, and put it right back on without adding any more holes to your body. So now with our shock towers flipped and moved forward, we can now reinstall the shocks onto the chassis. We're going to take those yellow springs and put them on the shock first and replace the spring cup. When reinstalling the shock onto the shock tower, we're going to use the forwardmost position in the shock tower. So now we have a much steeper shock angle in the rear, which will help lighten up those firmer springs that we swapped back there. And the front feels much softer than before as well. Now, before we put the wheels and tires back onto this rig, we're going to add a screw to the lower shock cups. Axial recently changed the lower shock cups on their shocks to have this clamping feature so that you'll never lose another shock cup. However, they don't include the screw. So if you've got either an M3 or ideally an M2.8 or 2.6, the ones that Axial uses on some of like their body panels and things like that, those work great. But an M3 screw will work in a pinch. So we're going to install the 4 screws into these spring cups to make sure we never lose them. Now for this next modification, I've installed a battery, and this is basically the largest battery that I would run. This is a 3S 5000 milliamp pack. Now what we're going to do is we're going to lower the body down as far as we can just to get this thing the best clearances we possibly can for fitting through tight locations. Now currently in the stock form, there's 3 holes showing above the top of the shock tower. What we're going to do is we're going to lower this body post 2 positions. We can't lower it all 3 because the body will start to hit on the front of this size LiPo. If you're running a smaller battery though, you could lower it all the way down. And in the rear, we're only going to be able to lower it one. Now, if you're extremely OCD and you want to make sure that you lower them both the same, that's totally up to you. This is basically just an appearance mod, but I don't think that the rake overall is going to be noticeable of this body, but I would rather have it all the way down than make sure that it was completely flat. Now, with those body posts currently in their lowest setting, we're going to replace the body onto the chassis. Now, our rear body posts go through the body, no problem. We can install those rear body pins without any modification. However, in the front, we're not able to actually see those body posts because we lowered it so much. Now, most of the interference is happening right here between the grille and the bumper. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to trim off the bottom of this body to clear enough to make sure that we can get this onto those body posts. With the bottom part of the grille trimmed off just to the bottom portion of the gray section of the grille, this body now fits down onto those body posts without any issue. At this point, I'm going to replace one front body clip and one rear body clip, and I'll show you why. So now with the body on the chassis, we're gonna flip it onto its side, and we're gonna look at this portion right here below the sliders. Since we've lowered this body, now we've got a lot more body showing below the edge of that slider, and this is something that we want to get trimmed off. I'm gonna take my Sharpie and just kind of trace along the higher flat edges of that slider. Now we can kind of see the line where that rock slider is going to sit. And we basically just need to pick a location to make a horizontal line across the body and trim it equally on each side. So now we've got the body back on, it's considerably lower onto the chassis, everything's looking much better and lower profile. The next thing on our list is going to be the front bumper. Now, this is the front bumper from that CRC 2017 Jeep JK. Now, the thing about it is that it sticks out there quite a ways, but there isn't any more hole locations on the bottom side for us to move it in. So we're going to have to make our own. What we're gonna do is we're gonna do a little bit of Dremel work to be able to move this thing back into the chassis to give us room to add another hole onto the pegs on the bottom of this bumper. When you're looking at it underneath on the chassis, this bottom edge of the bumper basically butts right up to where it mounts. So we need to make some extra room there, and then we need to remove a little bit of the webbing from the top side between this post and the top of that bumper to make room for it to slide further in so that we can drill another hole into this post to give us another mounting location. To do this, I'm going to be using my Dremel with a sandpaper flap disc. So we've taken that cut up to just about a 1/4 inch away from that front leading edge of the bumper. You will need to remove a little bit of the webbing from above the post. You can just use some simple Lexan scissors or side cutters for this and take in about a 1/4 inch. Make a cut on the top and bottom, and then you can just remove that piece of webbing with a pair of needle nose. Also note that once you get it pushed far enough in to make the new holes, you likely will have to trim the backside of these posts a little bit shorter because they'll start to hit the servo and battery tray in the vehicle. Then slide the bumper into place on the chassis, make sure that you're clear of the previous hole and that you'll have room to drill a new hole for the set pins. And with the bumper pushed all the way in, I'm going to use an 1/8 inch drill bit to drill a new hole in those bumper posts. And then we can reinstall the set pins to make sure that everything fits like it's supposed to. So that modification allowed us to tuck that bumper in around a 1/4 inch overall, which may not sound like a lot, but that's actually a really large amount that's really going to help your approach angle in the front of this truck. Now, this next tip is referring to the body pins. Now, if you're like me, you likely lose these body pins incredibly easily out on the trail. So what we're going to do isn't technically free, but it's really close to free. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take and shoe glue a couple of these rare earth magnets into the hood of this rig. So as you can see, there's a decent glob right there in the middle. I'm going to separate a couple of these rare earth magnets and press them into that shoe glue. I'm gonna try and not let the magnets stack on top of each other, and what we're looking to do is make sure that we can take them and set them there on the hood while we're on the trail and that they won't fall off. We're down to 2 modifications before we wrap this up. Personally, I don't like having this light bar on. I don't really like the style, and overall it's just big and tall and it can catch on rock. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this light bar completely, and it's just going to keep the clean appearance of just the cage and body on the car. Now if you plan on doing this mod after watching this video, note that these 4 screws that we pulled out of the side of the windshield brackets, these could be used on those shock cups that we put the screw into earlier. And for our last modification, again, this one isn't quite free, but I think that it's worth it. Now on the Honcho budget build, I added a digital voltmeter to the dash of that thing, and I think that it was completely worth it, and I want to do the same on this car. So I came up with a generic voltmeter mount that allows me to use that same style voltmeter that I used in the Honcho budget build on this car, or basically any other vehicle. It'll basically allow me to bolt one of these voltmeters up to anything that has a flat mounting location. And again, I'll upload this file onto Thingiverse in case you have a 3D printer and want to make one yourself. I'm going to add this to this area right here where this radio navigation screen is on this deadbolt interior. I'm holding the bezel over the dash, and I'm basically just going to make 4 rough holes and allow me to give a rough start before I do some fine tuning with a pair of Lexan scissors. So we've made the rough cut for the size of the voltmeter itself. And now I need to make a little bit of extra room for how this gauge bezel goes in there. So once you get that mount into the cutout, then you can drop the voltmeter in from the back side. To secure that voltmeter in, I'm going to use some flathead 2.5mm by 4mm screws. Once it's secured, I am going to use some shoe goo just to hold it in place and make sure that it's not going anywhere. I used a decent amount of shoe goo just all around it, just to make sure that no vibrations or hard impacts had any effect on its placement in the body. After a little bit of wiring, you can now see that that voltmeter is completely functional. Even during the day in bright sunlight, it's noticeable. During video, I had to turn the lights down just to give you a good look at it. But as you can see, right now it's reading 11.3 volts, and that will give me all of the information I need to know where my battery is sitting. I added an XT30 plug underneath the body to allow me to disconnect and connect this whole thing in an easy way. I soldered the wire right into the original Dean's plug underneath of that star battery connector. So after all that work and almost no money, we've got a rig that's going to be much more capable than it was out of the box. Some very simple changes just to make things work a little bit better, and I think that you're going to be much happier with your Axial SCX10-II Deadbolt than you would have otherwise. The SCX10-II Deadbolt is really a great place to start. It's the smallest investment that you can get into for an Axial vehicle, and it's just something that you'll be able to grow with. I've got kind of a soft spot for deadbolts. I've spent a lot of time working with them, and this deadbolt is almost exactly like my Axial SCX10-II Honcho was. So if you're looking for a long-term build with lots of options, go watch the Honcho budget build. It should give you tons of ideas of things you could do if you're looking to turn your deadbolt into something much more wild than it is when it comes out of the box. That is all we're going to cover on the Axial SCX10-II Deadbolt for today. Thanks for watching, guys. Like the video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe if you're not already. Hope you guys have a lot of fun with your deadbolts as well, and I'll see you on the next one.